Okay. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in today. Today we have a treat. We have a video roundtable with three industry experts. It's my pleasure to introduce Duncan Ferguson from Epson, Frank Mader from NedGraphics, and Mike Scruton from Adobe. Lots of continents here. Mike, over in good morning from San Francisco.
It's sunny over here. Yeah, Mike Scruton. I'm Director of Print Technology and Strategy here at Adobe. I work with our printer manufacturers, partners, deploying Adobe Tech into their solutions and enabling the whole end-to-end workflow, specifically all different markets from enterprise through to textile.
Okay, Duncan, could you intro?
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm also in the sun here in the UK. I work for Epson, so I'm the Vice President of our Commercial and Industrial Printing Division for Epson Europe. Epson is a Japanese technology company famed for its home printing and projection, but we've been a long time in various industrial industries, including the textile industry, for over 20 years.
Okay, thank you. And Frank, last but not least.
Thank you. Thanks, Debbie, for having us. So my name is Frank Mader. I'm the president of NedGraphics. NedGraphics is a software company that focuses on CAD software specifically for the textile industry. So we have desktop solutions. We also have plugins for Adobe. So really for the creative community, but also quite technical design because it is by definition for textile only.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you. Thank you. So for everybody listening, today we're going to dive into, there's so much going on. So what we want to do is dive into leveraging technologies that deliver agility, trust, and simplicity in the printed supply chain with so many facets, so many innovations, and so many market shifts at the moment. I'd like to really dive deep with all three of you into the specifics of the workflow and sew together really for our audience the best practice of how we can leverage technology in order to speed up environmental best practice, most importantly as well, speed up profitability and the creation of products on demand. So Frank, I think as the beginning of the process, it might be nice to start with yourself really. So let's talk about NedGraphics and the software, the latest innovations that you provide that start right at the very beginning. What does the designer need to do for today's workflow, and how should they address that?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. So it's interesting, and we are right at the beginning of the process with the creatives. And I always say the software that we have is really just trying to replicate something that designers have been doing for hundreds or potentially thousands of years with textile in particular. So we are trying to digitize this process, which is mostly a creative process. We do a lot of different outputs, including weaving and various things. Here we're talking about prints. And so the process is very, very similar to how it's always been. I think the difference here, and we'll get onto this with Mike and Duncan, is that of course the technology is evolving rapidly. So the goal of the designer, I suppose, is still the same. And the main concern that I always hear is there's concern around creating something that, or seeing something as an output that is the same as what the designer intended, right? I think that is still the number one concern. And I think more and more designers are feeling like this is becoming more and more elusive because there's a lot of parts of the workflow that they don't really control anymore. So whether it's something that's produced on the other side of the world or even the technology, and they always have this feeling that they create something and then just throw it over the fence and then don't really know what's happening. So I think what we try and focus, apart from purely providing the tools and all of those tools that they used to be more creative, is try and again reassure them and try and show them something that is reliable and that they can expect to be produced reliably. And of course we rely on a lot of others in that value chain, such as Mike and Duncan, but that's really the main thing that we are trying to solve.
Absolutely. One of the things that came out really when we were looking at the target audience, who the audience was going to be for this, is that when you say, you've got designers listening, manufacturers listening, printers listening, and the catch-all, Duncan, print professionals listening, when you think the skill sets across all of that are so varied, aren't they? And the needs of all of those people are so varied depending on the products that they're specifying. Mike, would you like to add a couple of comments on that? Just your take, your insights of how things have changed and what people need.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, Debbie. The part of the workflow that my team are responsible is the PDF print engine, right? And the PDF print engine is what sits very close to the printer, close to manufacturing, to prepare the designer's files for print and manufacture. And I think building on what Frank just said, I think one of the problems we've faced as an industry is the designer used to understand the manufacturing process precisely, right? You used to know exactly how this thing was going to be made, and used to prepare those files in exactly a format that particular manufacturing process required. Very often using screens or rollers or something like this, maybe something that was engraved. I think one of the trends that we've seen, of course, is that things have moved beyond those analog processes into a digital world as well. Maybe not exclusively, they're both. But this lack of control that Frank talks about, I think maybe stems from the fact that they're not now able to predict how something is going to be prepared. So that changes how you need to design. You need to design for what we would call a device-independent world. Creating files not at a particular resolution or in a particular way that one device can consume, but actually putting all that information into a single file so that any device can reproduce it. Now, when I'm talking to folks, I advocate the use of PDF a lot, because PDF allows us to store the artwork in the original form that the designer had on their devices. So you're keeping all the images, the photos, the raster content at full resolution. Whatever data you've got, you're keeping your artwork, which you've drawn with strokes and brushes and things like this, you're keeping it as vector. If you are using text, you're using fonts and this sort of thing. And you're describing the color with the same precision as you had it on your screen, right? If you were defining something in terms of a spot color or a particular color from your colorway, you're being very precise about what that color is, so that what you are seeing on the screen is actually then reflected in the file, so that the manufacturing process knows what your expectations were,
Yeah.
right? And by putting all that data into the file, into a PDF file, then that gives us the best possible chance of manufacturing this design using exactly the same thing that you saw.
So I guess, Frank, really here as well, what we've got is a whole system that starts at the drawing board, the digital drawing board, but gives the designer, the printer, the manufacturer, the depth of skill, the depth of application in order to address and pass the baton on, pass that file over to Duncan, which we'll dive into in a minute, really.
Yeah, and as Mike was saying, I think it's maybe it's a different skill, as you mentioned, Debbie, because again, I think all of us here will remember when, for example, a designer would be familiar with separations. They would look at separation, know exactly what that would look like once it was output. And now it's a very different world. And as Mike was saying, the same artwork might go onto various different devices. Some of them might be digital. So that part of it they cannot control anymore, and they can't even really necessarily see what that looks like. So I think that is really the challenge. And then, of course, on our side, we also have people who want to digitize some of their process up front. So looking at a proof on the screen, for example, et cetera, et cetera. So we're adding a lot of complexity here, and probably again we need to be able to provide those tools that make it easy to go through that end-to-end process, and again to have some level of confidence that it will be okay in the end.
Absolutely, because really the truth is input matches output, doesn't it? Really, the quality of the input, the quality of the file, and the information that's embedded within that allows the file to be much more portable. Duncan, I'd like to bring you in here as well, because You kind of we're working at the design stage. Mike at the back end as well is, you know, working with Adobe Print Engine, lots and lots of innovations there, and we'll dive back into that too. But you're picking up the baton with the customer's expectation that what they see on the screen is going to print perfectly, and yet you, as a technology provider, have had no input whatsoever into how that file is created.
Yeah, which has often proved an issue in terms of colour reproduction, especially has often been a challenge. You know, getting colour reproduction from screen onto print. Now, there are ways that you can manage it, and obviously we've been working closely together with companies like NedGraphics and Adobe and others for many years to try and solve this. But it's how we try and continuously simplify the process and make it easier for people to work with. You know, we've introduced ourselves, you know, a really easy to use spectrophotometer recently, just to try and get, well, hang on, where's your original color? Even before it's gone through the process of digitizing, what's your original reference? And can we take that data all the way through the process to the end printer? You know, embedding that data through whatever steps in the process. And making it very easy for the print professional just to pick it up and going, yeah, okay, I don't need a lot of training on this. It's pretty intuitive. And then looking at the software that we provide, the RIP software that we provide, because fundamentally that's what we do in the chain in terms of the software, is we drive the printer that puts ink on fabric. And then, just incorporating the ability for our RIP to simulate some of the old technology, some of the methodologies used in the old technology. And I'll just pick up one example, which is, manually adjusting individual colors. That is something that comes out of the screen world. We don't traditionally do that digitally. We work with process color, whether it be 4-color, 6-color, 8-color, but we work with process color, and we work with a file that is tuned to deliver what the file coming in wants to achieve. Here we're allowing people to tweak, which is something that people have done in the screen world for generations. Fundamentally it's two things really. We focus on that color consistency, because ultimately that's what we can really, we can simulate the lines and the data and the text relatively simply. The color is always the challenge, and what we're trying to do is keep that as simple as possible now.
Yeah, that's something we should chat about as well, really, because not all technologies are equal, and not all ink sets are equal either, are they? And being able to achieve what we call a gamut, that space, that color space. Mike, this is something that we were talking about recently, the difference between CMYK and RGB. Perhaps, Mike, you could come in here and discuss that with us as well, really, how important it is that the technology and the workflow is primed automatically by embedding the data to move through knowing the color space of its production.
Yeah. That's basically traditionally how we've designed in the textile world, right? Where we have a colorway, and the colorway says it's got these 6, 8, 12 colors in it, and we design with these palette of these specific colors and then reproduce them. I think one of us make sure that we don't actually completely scare our audience, because we've made it sound as if this brave new world is so scary that we couldn't possibly, live in it. And you might take away that what we're trying to do is actually just put everything back in the box so it's like safe again to play with. I think actually we can be even more inspirational than that, right? I think this new technology we have allows us to do things that we couldn't previously have done with analog technologies. Maybe we'll come back to that in a second. But to your specific question, Debbie, traditionally when we design on screen, we are designing in a world in colors, particularly in the textile industry, which reflects the red, green, and blue, used to be phosphors, now LEDs, that we see on the screen. So we're designing this light, world of light, the light that's shining at the screen out of us. And traditionally in the printing world, we actually come to putting something onto a substrate, inks or dyes, onto a fabric or a paper or something like this, so that the color then is reflected when light shines off this substrate. And so we print in a world of CMYK traditionally to actually achieve the same sort of colors as you would see on the screen using a different process. We could go into this bit for hours. The advances that we've seen in the last few years, particularly in the digital printing space, is to add additional colors in addition to the CMYK to fill in the gaps, right? Between the cyan, the magenta, and the yellow, there are other colors available, reds, greens, and blues, for example, which can be difficult to reproduce in a CMYK world. So what typically is done in the digital space is we add additional colors to our CMYK inks or dyes to give us more coverage, better coverage, more accurate colors, deeper colors. So the trick then that Duncan's able to work with his end of the world is to map what the color that somebody is trying to reproduce with whatever that device has got, whatever the capabilities of the device are. And one device might have completely different capabilities to another device, potentially even changing depending on whether we're printing on a natural or a synthetic fabric, for example, or what treatments the fabric has had on might affect the exact colors that are available. But we're able to do that digitally to take the world of whatever color it is you're trying to reproduce and achieve this more accurately in a world where we're not just loading up this digital device with the 4, 6, 8, 12 colors that you had in your colorway. We're emulating those colors. We're simulating those colors using other inks. Now, it's really, really powerful because it means the number of colors we can reproduce on any one device is much larger. We don't have the cost of manufacturing expensive screens or rollers, engraving something. We don't have the time that involves, as well as the cost. So it's allows us to be a lot more productive, allows us to do shorter press runs, but it relies on the fact that we're taking these red, green, blue colors and reproducing them using more printing primaries at the back end in order to get that extended. We call it an extended color gamut, right? Whereas the CMYK that we traditionally use gives us a color this much. By extending the color gamut by adding additional primaries, we're able to go out here and get much closer to what the user saw on the screen.
Duncan, when we met recently at the launch of one of the new SureColor products, you've added extra inks into some of those as well, haven't you, to allow people to extend their gamut depending on which product and which applications they're using.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we've been frequently doing. And if you look at the different printers that we launch in different markets, we can be anywhere between 4 colors and 12 colors as primary colors that are used. And if you're getting up around the 10 to 12 color, you've probably got a gamut of 95% plus of spot colors can be hit. With the products that we design, for instance, for the proofing market, you're up near 99%.
Yeah.
But that then has to be then balanced with specific markets wanting specific colors and wanting one specific color more than others. Red is often one that gets, on the gamut map gets picked as, we need a really vivid red. But to achieve that, you may then lose at the other side. So you need to balance the wish to cover the total gamut with the needs of the market that might be towards a specific color area, So I'm thinking laminates and home furnishings. There's a lot of browns and oranges and so you have to favour that part of the colour wheel.
Yeah, and equally when you get into textile signage, you've got a lot of flesh tones which can have their own problems as well. So I think pretty much every different industry has a specific colour space where it might have a few issues. But I think over the years, we're really addressing those very, very closely. Frank, I'd like to dive with you here. I'd like you to just explain, taking on board Mike's comment, of how is NedGraphics then? We've kind of tried to scope it out, but the designer really within the NedGraphics software can dive into each section of this. Really, how do you simplify it? How do you address that within the software that you provide and partner with, so that it takes that baton, I guess, for whichever product across whichever sector through the system? What's it doing automatically?
Yeah, so the thing that's interesting here, and I was just listening to Duncan, is that very often the designer doesn't necessarily know what the output is going to be, right? And I think that the shame there, and Mike was saying we can be more creative and so on, and is that sometimes at the front end you don't necessarily know that you can take advantage of that kind of technology because you designed for what you think might be a particular output process, particularly in mass production, and you don't necessarily know that you have that freedom to be a little bit or to take advantage more of that technology. So there is a technology element to this, and I think the technology now is amazingly advanced. But there is, I guess, a good old-fashioned communication challenge, which is around how do you even know what is possible? And I think this is where collectively, nothing to do with the technology, we have to try and engage with the knowledge, with the awareness, and everything else, because the technology becomes more and more complex, and it enables you to do a lot more. But people don't necessarily know that. So that's a completely separate challenge. To your question, though, we try and focus a lot on providing visibility and this collaboration because we have a lot of clients that work across the whole supply chain. So some of them might be designing in the US, for example, but their production might be happening in the Far East. That's a very common scenario in this industry. So what we try and do and make it easy for those people to collaborate, to work together on the same projects, and then to provide the information, the data, and everything else to whoever comes next in the supply chain. So that's what we try, at a very high level. That's what we try and promote, and also really just focus on a fully digital workflow all the way through. Because again, this is a very complex supply chain with many stakeholders, many cycles across different geographies. So if we can try and streamline this and make it, easier to do and cut some time of the process, that is really what we try to do. But really, this concept of the communication and the expectation, that is something that we struggle with, because again, it's like how do you make people aware of what is even possible with this technology that's evolving very, very quickly on the output side.
I think textiles is just such like sustainability, just one word, and there are so many depths into all the different applications and the different sectors within the textile market, and each one has its own different specifications, doesn't it really? So I guess really for the designer, or for the designer, the manufacturer, or the printer, really, they need different tools right at the very beginning. And I think one of the most important ones, which Mike and I have spoken about in the past, is in order to meet those expectations, you have to set the parameters, don't you? So I guess, Frank, within your software as well, you can set the software so that the designer or the printer can control the input and control the output, really, whether it's in a remote setting or in a manufacturing unit. And Duncan will bring you in here as well to discuss that, how that collaboration, how that partnership works, so that you are embedding enough data into the file and allowing people to create within a space.
Yeah, and just on that point, it's an interesting one, because we're talking color here, which is quite complex, but there's almost two sides to this. One is the intent, like someone wants to create something, they want to make sure it looks like what they intend to produce, and then in production, and this is more the Duncan's challenge or his clients, is how do you control that repeatability, right? So you know what's intended, but how do you make sure it is literally like this, piece after piece after piece? Or sometimes you can have runs or jobs that are done on different devices, or even different technologies completely. So that's a whole different challenge, which I suppose is not so much the designer's problem. In a way, they trust, or they should trust, that someone in production is taking care of that. So their main issue is, how do I know what my intent is going to be like once it's output?
I agree with you. Yeah, Duncan, building agility then into the systems across multiple systems. I mean, if you look at the Epson range, you've got dye sublimation, pigment, D to G, D to F. being able to connect the two with the print engine in the background, everything all together, that must have changed massively over the last few years.
It has, and the challenge of getting consistent output, printed output over multiple devices is one that has caused us to scratch our heads for decades, let alone years. As I said, we've made great strides since launching the SD10, the spectrophotometer. We link it in with our own RIP, so that we can pick up the data immediately wherever the printer is. Easy to transport, it's easy to measure, easy to transport, and should give the confidence that wherever you're printing on this device, and actually across multiple devices, you're going to get the same color, because the color is actually independent of the device, the ink, or the fabric. It's just measuring the color.
Yeah.
And that's important to know. So effectively, you are excluding all the ambient light, so you're getting a real color. So obviously, depending on the light circumstance you're in, the color will change. But that's the same with everything. And this goes a long way. And if I can loop that back into sort of the arguments about sustainability, one of the issues on sustainability is how do we reduce the air miles? How do we reduce the waste that goes with textile production? And one of the simple ways of doing it is producing things to the volume they're needed, when they're needed, close to the customer who needs it.
Yeah.
And if you can't guarantee the output that you're making, you struggle to guarantee you can do that. So that's really what we're trying to do with this, is to create a process that simplifies that ability to decentralize the manufacturing process from a printing perspective. It's not the whole process, but it's one step.
No, absolutely. We have to kind of introduce best practice, don't we, really, and share the knowledge of best practice. And from my perspective, Frank, I think you'll probably agree with this. There are so many new actors and so many different people within the textile industry that you if you've not worked in a manufacturing production environment, you don't necessarily know how to put that seamless workflow together. And I think as an industry, we have to really share knowledge, really share knowledge, so that we can all work, in a very native way, as you say, globally, but all have the same objectives in mind, and understand how we literally, go back to that word, thread all of this together.
Yeah. And again, the technology should help, and we're dealing with also, frankly, different generations of people. And when you have very young designers who might not be familiar with those processes that we just talked about, and you could argue they shouldn't have to. So they just want to be confident that what they're doing themselves is going to work, and a lot of it is, as we said, is taken care of by the technology. This is much better than it used to be. But yeah, the collaboration, as we said before, is very critical. I think trying to enable this flexibility, like Duncan was hinting to, brands in particular are very keen on reducing their carbon footprint. I think this is probably top of the list of priorities for them. So whatever we can do to try and make sure that they are confident that the quality of what they do will still be preserved, and that it doesn't actually matter where physically these products are produced, I think will be hugely helpful here.
Mike, would you like to add something on standards?
Yeah.
Best practice.
Yeah, I think we almost sound like we're in danger of romanticizing the past, thinking that we lived in some gilded age where the manufacturing process we've used have just worked.
No, we had lots of waste.
and this is the case, right? It's not as if the world has changed. We've always relied on collaboration, on relationships between the designer and the brand, and wherever the thing was being manufactured anywhere around the world. It's always been the case, whatever the technology at play. What the latest technologies are bringing us are new opportunities to manufacture in new ways in different places, using different materials, components, dyes, things that may or may not need washing, etc. So that's what the new world is, right? But it doesn't mean that we've almost lost that muscle of relationship and collaboration because we've been doing it the same way for such a long time, right? And I think to my mind, it's as much a matter of remembering that these relationships are important. That relationships, any relationship we have in 2025 is different to a relationship we had, 20 years ago. We don't necessarily get on airplanes and fly around the world all the time these days, right? We do things virtually on screens. We communicate digitally in a general world. So I think when it comes to the world of what we're manufacturing here in the textile space, we can use these tools to, yes, do the sorts of things that we used to do in the past, do them in new locations, do them more sustainably, do more exciting things in some places. And I think that's partly what the technology is enabling us to do.
So, Duncan, would you agree as well that this is about building trust, and to do that we have to share knowledge, perhaps more knowledge?
Yeah.
And how does Epson kind of facilitate that through your software? Because you have a huge resource there, don't you, for your supply chain, for knowledge?
Yes, I mean fundamentally, yes. I mean what we do is we try and make our technology available for third parties to interface with, with software, and also, it's not only driving the printer and getting the designs of the print. There is a big issue also in terms of integrating the workflow in manufacturing. Taking the textile, you're not making a printed fabric, you're making a garment after all. So you need to take into account what you're going to do with post-processing, what you're going to do with the sewing, etc., etc. And it's basically being open to working with people who are specialists in their area to rebuild a trustworthy process that is different in the digital world from what was in the analog world. When we started with Mona Lisa 23 years ago, we just copied what was in the analog world, to be honest.
Yeah.
The inks were identical to the analog inks. Were they the best inks? Was that the best thing to do? Who knows? But it was what people were used to, so that's the way we did it. Now we're looking at moving on to the next stage to say, well, actually, why aren't we doing pre and post treatment at the same time that we're jetting the ink? Why do we have these different processes all working separately? And that's really the next phase of what Mike, I think, is talking about in terms of digital can offer so much more. But it's taken us almost 20 years to move away from the traditional analog way of doing it, even with digital process.
Yeah, reinventing
but
the
now
past.
we're looking at that. But then, of course, we need ink chemists, we need software specialists, and they all exist in different places. So we have to almost restart those collaborative processes, because again, Mike was correct. When you've got the same industry and the same process for 200 years, everyone develops down their narrow silo, and that's the way the industry had become.
I think
it's exciting.
It's super exciting, and I think with the growth of e-commerce, that has sent its challenges and opportunities, hasn't it? Really, Frank. We haven't spoken about Optitex, but when you talk about digital twins, etc., that's kind of what really is starting this kind of no hands manufacturing. On demand is with no touch points, with no human hands in there as well, and embedding everything that you need, aligned to your business model, aligned to your manufacturing workflow, your factory or your design studio, whoever it is and wherever you reside and whichever seat you sit on in this huge supply chain. That must have made a huge difference, and that is really a big signpost for the future, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think this is definitely what's going on. And one thing I've noticed, as we talk about collaboration and awareness, one thing I've noticed recently, and it is quite recent in the last couple of years, I would say, is that a lot more of our clients, brands in particular, are now investing their own resources into educating themselves and educating their teams. So I now see these optimization teams, or they have various names, but essentially they are looking at all of the technology that's out there and trying to really figure out how best to make use of it. and really expecting all of us in this supply chain to collaborate together. So that is quite interesting, because I think they've gone from being almost overwhelmed by this technology to suddenly realizing that they have to grab hold of it, and really just trying to understand what is the opportunity for them, and then trying to get this collaboration going. So the collaboration between the vendors is also a huge thing. Working more in open standards and stuff of that nature. I think we have an industry which traditionally was quite siloed and quite proprietary, and I think this is one of the big changes, one of the big exciting changes actually that is happening. So you can facilitate that total digitization.
It's a huge shift, isn't it? The end of the silo, really, and bringing everybody together. Mike, would you like to add a comments there?
Yeah, I think this is part of what excites me, and conversations like this, right? You've seen 3 very large players in this industry, NedGraphics and Adobe and Epson, collaborating on how to build better end-to-end solutions for the industry, for our partners, for our customers, right? And it's about how we can take the learnings of all these institutions, as Duncan intimated. When you try and shift to a new world after doing something for 200 years, or maybe we've been doing it, you could say we've been doing it one way for the last 24 years, right? We're on this verge of this other new shift as well. And I think we're going to achieve that, using the skill sets of these big companies who've been helping us do this, for the last 24 years to get to the next 24 years. It'd be interesting to come back and see what this all looks like in 24 years' time.
You'll probably be able to by the time we get to 24 years time.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, you'll be able to come back and look. Gentlemen, what a fantastic conversation. It's so exciting, isn't it? We really are on the dawn of a whole new landscape here, aren't we? It's super exciting.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Frank, anything you'd like to add?
No, again, I think I'm glad we sort of finished on that point, because again, I think the future is about collaboration, is about integrating all of these various technologies, and not about trying to solve these things individually. I don't think that's possible these days. It is extremely complex, but the opportunities are huge.
Yeah. I think the overriding message there is simplifying the solution, isn't it? With new technologies in new formats, which open up so many new market opportunities as well. I mean, the markets are shifting so quickly. Super exciting.
Yeah.
Really is. Well, gentlemen, Duncan, Frank, Mike, thank you so much for your time today. Look forward to chatting with you all again. And to everybody else, thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to reach out to any of our guests today, please do so, and we'll make sure that all of that information is in the video podcast notes. So that's kind of all from me, and everyone back to their day jobs, I guess.
Okay, thanks very much, Debbie.
Right. Thanks, Debbie. Frank,
thank
Mike.
you, everybody, and thank you so much for sharing your insights.
See you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.